applauded. The applause should be for you, the debate. And welcome to everyone here who's here for this important discussion. You're not going to get a long speech. I'll just make a very general introduction. I think most people know this, but a few words. This is part of an overall European Commission approach to blockchain. We have the European Blockchain Partnership of 29 countries building a European blockchain services infrastructure in RegTech, diplomas, self-sovereign identity, authentication of audit documents, the Blockchain Observatory and Forum, which will be continuing with, a new team because we have a public tender every 2 years. This is not a permanent contract, but I can say very clearly that we've been very, very happy with Ludovic and the team here, and we'll miss them, but we'll continue working with them as our close colleagues, I think, in the community. And we have workshops coming up on the 5th of March on energy, and then a final workshop on the 26th of March, which will close this stage of the Blockchain Observatory Forum, but it doesn't end. Also, we have the digital assets public consultation out right now. It's important to answer to this. This is where Brussels will, and I have to say, we've been aware of blockchain since about 2012, 2013, and maybe a little bit earlier. And we haven't regulated up until now, so it's definitely not the stereotype of if blockchain, if something moves, Brussels regulates it. The time has come on the digital assets to say what's an investment token, what's a payment token, what's a utility token, or some other framework. And this is your moment now to say what you think about that on the legislative side. Then there's ENACO, which a lot of you are aware of, which is the stakeholders organization that we work with. And we have the Secretary General, the CEO here, Mark Patterner, who's also taking part. And then this exercise. And what is important here, we have the meeting today. We will have a video. We will have a report, which will not be one of the formal reports that you've gotten used to from the Blockchain Observatory Forum because they're finishing up. But the really important moment there is that your inputs are welcome today and going forward. We're setting up the work programs for the upcoming research and innovation. And here it is really important to have from the technical, the commercial, the academic communities, your inputs on where the research priorities should be, what is needed, what is already solved and doesn't need more research or innovation, what is something that's perhaps irrelevant, even though maybe it's in the public consciousness or in the publicity. So we very much look forward to hearing from all of you on this. And with that, that's perhaps enough as an introduction, and we go straight into the content. But underlining again, please send your answers to the various surveys that we will have on the Research and Innovation Program, and you can also contact us informally, though. The more things are in writing, the more we can disseminate them to our other colleagues, and then they have more impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frédéric, for this introduction. So I'm actually going to... it's perfect. Okay, so maybe a few words before we start. So there are several objectives for today's discussion. I think that we can categorize them in two main questions. The first one will be about today really assessing what's the current state of play on research in Europe. Also taking time to compare that to what is happening in other regions and assess if the topics that are being covered are currently nicely covered and if more efforts should be put into it and where maybe there should be some lack of investment in that space. So that will be the first part of the discussion, and that will be mainly focused today with the first panel discussion where we have academics that will be explaining us what is their current work and what is their vision about the collaboration between the different academic stakeholders, and also the collaboration between those academic stakeholders and the private sector. The second discussion for the day will be more about what is currently expected. So as you all know, blockchain technology is still fairly recent and has still a long way to go to obtain a maturity level that is satisfying for everyone. And so there are many challenges that are left to be overcome. And we are going to discuss what are the most pressing challenges today. And having a view from the industry, from the private sector, but also keeping in mind that some actors such as the public institutions, the public sector, are also facing the same issues, and see what the market is actually currently facing, and what should be the priorities based on those needs that are really coming from the ground. Because of course it is important to start long-term research efforts that will maybe give some yields in the next 10 years, but it's also important to look at the current situation and see what are the quick wins that we can focus on at the moment. And I think that one last very important aspect is the fact that it is very well known that the research efforts are translating directly into project opportunities for the regions that have been working on them. And so I think that as one of the observatory's goals for the last 2 years have been to try to foster the development of innovation on blockchain in Europe, we are going to have this discussion about what should be prioritized in the EU in order to have those flagship projects emerging and being able to really have Europe benefit from the technology in a very practical aspect. So those are the discussions for the day. As Pedro was saying, there will be 2 main outputs for the day, so all the discussions are recorded. So please be aware of that. If there is an issue for any of you, please be aware of that and try to avoid to be filmed if there is an issue for you. And there will be a second output that will be a workshop report. And as Peter said, and I want to stress that, we are going to take inputs also after the workshop. So obviously, most of the discussions are going to happen today between this group of people. And I'm really glad that we have a focused group of people who have more expert level than we usually have to have those discussions today. So please feel free to participate, interact. This is really your day. And you are the experts, and we want to draw expertise from you. So please participate, and if there is anything that you think was missing from the day, any discussion that we might not touch upon because we have a limited amount of time, it will still be possible after the workshop to cover them. A quick look at the agenda, so you have already probably that in mind. This will be really focusing on 2 panel discussions and the presentation. And one important aspect will be at the end of the day, when we will have this working session, 1 hour and a half together, where we will be trying to solve some of the issues that will have been discussed previously in the panels in a more focused way, and with the intention to really summarize what is the current state of play and try to formulate recommendations also. This is one of the major aspects of the EU Observatory. We always try to formulate recommendations that will be easily actionable for the different stakeholders, whether that be the European Commission or any other stakeholder of the ecosystem. And so that time at the end of the day will be the opportunity to do that. Without further ado, I would like to kickstart the day with one of my colleagues, Nicolas Liochon, who will be talking today about examples of blockchain-related research and how those blockchain-related research can be segmented and prioritized. So please welcome Nicolas Liochon for his presentation. And I'm sure that
Hello, so I'm Nicolas Liochon. I work at Consultation in R&D, and I'm going to introduce some of the things that we're doing and the context. I will just say, okay, what are the principal problems that we have to solve in blockchain? Then I will say, okay, how can we solve them? And what's the path to it? Okay, so that's simple. Kind of personal vision, but I think that if we look at blockchain today, we have to solve 4+1 problems. Scalability, how many trades, how many transactions can you do? Can you add as many transactions as you wish? Privacy, what you do, is it public? Is it non-public? Can you hide what you're doing to others? Can you hide what is your current state, your balance, if you're speaking about money, this kind of thing. So this is something quite complicated. Generalization. So can you do any type of contract with a blockchain? Can you do, for example, machine learning? Can you learn on the blockchain? Can you use a model on the blockchain? How do you do that? Something complicated. And blockchain is about decentralization. Can you increase the decentralization? Can you keep it? It's another question. Okay. And I said 4 plus 1 because an underlying one is user experience. Is the system actually usable? For example, in blockchains, you have private keys. By default, you lose your private keys, you lose your money. It's kind of nice things. That belongs to user experience. A lot of things are possible today, but it's so slow that it's not really practical. A transaction that takes 1 hour to be confirmed, is it good from a user experience point of view? So all this is an underlying issue. Often when people present problems, they like trilemma. Trilemma are great because you can say, oh look, you have to choose between scalability, decentralization, you can do kind of management things like choosing options, and it's about taking decisions, making choices. So people tend to like this. And I like this stuff from Emin Genscher, who is a professor at Cornell University, who says actually trilemma, got the choice, my own trilemma, it's either it's correct and it's a trilemma, but it's absolutely useless. Either it's insightful, incorrect, but then it's not a trilemma anymore. And it can be insightful and a trilemma, but then it's not correct anymore. And the point is, for us here, of course it's not a trilemma because I've got more dimensions than this, but as well, that when you look at problems, they are not that much in opposition. You can have the same solution to 2 problems, or something even more complicated. So looking at, just making choice when you look at solutions is likely the wrong way. So that's right. So just to introduce in more details the different issues, scalability, simple, you want more transactions. And we know that today, look at Bitcoin, we've got 7 transactions per second, Ethereum is 15. And we know that there are solutions which are basically parallelization, and there are a little bit more unknown solutions like proof of execution, and I will come back to that later. Scalability. Privacy. You want to hide as many things as you want. You want to hide your balance, you want to hide the transactions, you don't want people to know that you're actually doing transactions. Sometimes you may want to hide things from other participants. For example, you have an account, people can pay you, but you want to hide your account so they can't do any kind of correlations between different activities. And basically you want to hide your whole data. And there's a lot of partial ways to solve this. And there's a lot of different solutions. Icon-based solution, what we call UTXO-based, which is every operation creates a subset of data, and then you have to more or less reconciliate and find it done. And usually there's a big issue on scalability, so you can have privacy, but if you are not happy with 7 transactions per second, you will have even less than 7 transactions per second. So that's privacy for us. Generalization. So Ethereum likes the word Turing complete, which basically means whatever, including things that don't work. So can you do everything? Is it going to be efficient? Again, if you want to learn a model, a machine learning model of the blockchain, can you do it? Answer is no. And at what risk, which means, oh yeah, you can write whatever you want, but if you do an error, maybe you will lose all the money attached to this contract, which is a little bit bad. The point is, okay, you want to be very generic, to write any kind of software, of contract, and is it going to be compatible with privacy and scalability? It's actually a big deal. And speaking about user experience, just think about how is it to analyze what the contract is doing when everything is private, which is a big issue. So, as an example of where privacy and generalization can be in opposition is the issue we had on whatever blockchain 2 years ago, I think, when they discovered that the creator of the blockchain had actually more money than what they pretended. So they said, yeah, when you create the blockchain, we have this, but everything is private, and it's very generic. So you discover by accident that they have more than what they said. Decentralization. So decentralization is interesting because at the beginning, Bitcoin and Ethereum were supposed to be very, very decentralized. Anyone can participate. But there's a kind of reality is the more you can optimize things, the more you understand things, the more better advantage you have, and that leads to centralization. Some people already know how to manage miners today on the mainnet, and as people basically add an advantage which leads to centralization. And that's why today you've got in Bitcoin, I think 7 miners or something like this. A little bit more on Ethereum, it's around 15, but it's not that much decentralized. So can you increase the decentralization? And there are some solutions to this. Sharding, for example, which splits the blockchain in small parts, is a way to increase decentralization. And there are other ways. I will come back to this. User experience, what does it work? Okay, I was giving this example, can you regulate it, can you administrate it, especially when it can manage maybe 10,000 transactions per second. Is it still something that you can manage? If everything is private and with thousands of transactions, private stuff, how do you do that? So it's the underlying issue for everything. So, that's the problems we want to solve. What can we do to solve them? So, high-level point of view, so look, the research topics is going to be cryptography and computer science. And, okay, you knew that already. From that, we can do a very detailed matrix of all the topics. This topic is one and this one. And actually, you have so many topics. For us, for example, at Consultation, we just have a new way to follow these topics, and just managing the list of the topics to work on is basically all the research resources that we will have. So that's too much details, and we don't do that. And basically, we look at kind of generic solutions, under implementation to them, and all this stuff, people are saying, yeah, guys, actually, one way to solve a lot of things is split it, distribute it. Okay, so you've got sidechains, sharding. The idea is, okay, you want to do more trades, go on sidechains. It will be a sub-environment. You will do your trade there. And then you can do privacy there, because it's your own chain, hidden, so it's right, you're solving it. That's one way. Basically, trying to distribute things is a kind of high-level solution. Something that is happening a lot is specializing, saying, okay, we can't really have everything we want with something very generic, but we can look at something very specialized. So if you heard about state channels, lightning networks, that's basically this idea. Something very, very specific, solve a small issue, solve it well. And there are some other approaches, roll-ups are belonging to this category, where you basically reorganize things in a very different way. So that's more or less a kind of mapping that you can do. Say, oh, I've got 5 problems. Here, I've got 4 solutions, so does it really work? And as you can guess, there's no solution for all problems. And you can actually add an extra layer of complexity, which is, as the solutions are not in opposition, you actually can compose with them. So for example, you can have sidechains, and on the sidechain, you will put a private channel, and that's okay. A roll-up, I know that I haven't described it, it's okay. But you can put a roll-up on a shard, and it's okay. And then you can say, oh, I can put my solution state channel on a roll-up, but I will put on a shard. And you've got 3 layers. And if you look at, on paper it works, it's nice. And basically the idea is the user experience is going to be like this one because of the final complexity of the system. So what we do at the end is a little bit different. So there's an important topic that has been known for a while. I mean, it's basically 20 years old, stuff called zero knowledge, with Turing Prize that was given 2 or 3 years ago. And in order to introduce what it does, this zero knowledge is, from a high-level point of view, quite simple. It's you're going to show, to prove that you know something without revealing it. Which I agree that it seems irrelevant to the discussion, but I will come to it. Okay? You know something, you want to prove it, but you're not going to reveal what it is. And you're going to provide the proof, and anyone can check the proof. That's what it is. Okay, so irrelevant examples. Okay, you're supposed to you want to rent a flat, and the owner says, okay, prove me that you can pay. And what you do today, here is my salary, is my contract, and basically here is my life. And the guy is, okay, as I know everything about your life, I'm okay, I can rent this flat to you. You could do something different, which is, I'm going to prove you that I've got enough money. Let's say that I've got more than 3 times the cost of a flat, but I'm not going to reveal my salary. That's this kind of thing that we can do. And a little bit more relevant there, you're a mathematician, and you're getting paid to solve a problem, and you find a solution, and you want to be paid, but the problem is the guy is going to say, yeah, but show me the solution, then I pay you, and you don't trust the guy who gave you these problems. How can you prove that you have the solution without revealing the solution? Because then you fear that you won't get paid. So that's, again, zero knowledge proof. Okay, you can, look, there's a proof, but you can check that I have the solution, but I'm not going to give you the solution. But these kind of things. So, when we're on a blockchain system, why is it actually relevant? This blockchain is about managing trustless relationships. So you can have a business relationship with someone without having to establish the trust in any way. The way we do that today with blockchains is, okay, when something happens, everybody will be executing what happens, and so we know that the transaction is good because I execute it again. Okay? Why are you supposed to run the node? Is you will receive all the transactions, you will execute them, and so on. And everybody who is running a node is executing all the transactions, all the same transactions all over again. It's obviously complicated because if you want to have a system that can manage 10,000 transactions per second, it means that your own node will be able to receive 10,000 transactions per second. So basically being very big, and so on. So that's this kind of issue. When you're speaking about zero-knowledge systems or scalability, you're going to say, oh, actually, I don't need to re-execute the transaction. If I can have a proof that the transaction was correctly executed, I just check the proof, and I'm done. And the hope is checking the proof is less expensive than checking, redoing the transaction. That's right. And then the blockchain becomes a place where you can check proofs. That's the idea. Of course, when I speak about zero knowledge, you can say, yeah, but it's likely very useful for privacy, and the answer is yes, it is, but it's a kind of later stage. As well, the question is, okay, can you do any kind of contract? And the answer is, yeah, maybe. So, when you have something as, I would say, complicated and impactful as this, the idea is not just to rewrite everything. The idea is to go at smaller stages, say, okay, can we use this kind of technology for scalability and decentralization? Scalability with something that we know how to do already with basically this mechanism that I described. It helps actually decentralization because you don't need to be a big node, check the proofs. So the idea is anyone can check your proof. So you don't need big nodes, big miners to manage this. Anyone can do it. Once you do it, which is basically what we call a rollup, that's something that solves this. When you got there, there's some stuff that we actually propose on anonymous rollup, which is adding a privacy to this kind of mechanism. Okay, which is privacy at scale. And at this point, we're at the research is done, but formalizing exactly what it means in terms of implementation, it's still something in progress. And how can you generalize, which is how can you write any type of contract is something that is the thinking process. And we still need to have a good user experience with all of this, which means that basically we need to do some checkpoints and, oh, we've solved this. And from a user experience point of view, what does it mean? Do we still understand what we're doing? Is it still something manageable? Yes, no, and so on. So that's the approach that we're taking. It means that we need to define new protocols. We need to implement them, and I will come back to this a lot. And there's a very fancy part, which is the cryptography, because zero knowledge is a new word in cryptography. And we're basically reinventing everything when you're doing this. Okay, so if you speak to a cryptographer, they love that because they have to reinvent everything that was invented previously. And there's a lot of impact on how efficient it is. So there's hundreds of different proposals. There's nothing in 2020, but it's because my table is not up to date. There's still new stuff coming up. So it's changing all the time. And it's changing all the time as well. What we're doing is, okay, from an implementation point of view, how far can we go to make it very efficient? So it means that not only it's something very complicated from a mathematical point of view, we're looking as well at a lot of different ways of implementing it. Okay, so here, when you're going at this is, okay, I've got a mathematical tool, I want to make it efficient, I will look at hardware solutions, which means that you were doing mathematics and you're doing now low-level electronics when you're around this point. Low-level electronics and a little bit of finance as well, because it's 10 million or like this to when you play with this. And there's a big promise, which is look at the beginning it's a little bit slow, but here it will be very, very fast, don't worry. Which is absolutely research, promise, and hopes, expectations. And it means for us, we're building protocols. And what we're doing in terms of that kind of high-level planning as we see it, can have different opinions. I can hear about different opinions, but research is about, okay, can we have for zero knowledge the perfect scheme? So some guys, typically in Stanford, are looking at this. But the perfect scheme. On this, we say, oh, now that we have a perfect scheme, we're going to re-implement the right cryptographic primitive on it. And then we'll have efficient implementation. But it's cryptography. So you need to analyze them to be sure that it's not broken. So there's some work to do there, okay, which is basically you've got researchers saying, oh, we should do things like this, and you've got other researchers saying, oh, let's check that it works. So that's another one. And then you've got other implementation, which is low-level details, but are quite important. So back to this. So yeah, just on this, my expectation is more or less that it's going to take 10 years. So some people expect to have stuff in 2 years. That's optimistic. And my personal one is, okay, the full finish, it will be a solved problem in 10 years. In 10 years, it's done. Which is, I feel a little bit optimistic, actually, even if some people are more optimistic than me. So what does it mean for us here? It doesn't mean that the fact that it takes 10 years to solve the full problem doesn't mean that with a partial solution you can't do things. So typically, we expect that we can solve many, many issues and can have practical solutions at sooner stages. Okay? So here we're aiming at a year. something like this actually on this one we don't know yet because we have not done the research. But it's basically this approach. Conclusions. So what we have is there's, in terms of research, okay, great, fun, exciting cryptography with mathematicians, equations all over the place, including smart people. It's a pleasure. Really, okay, it's likely a long-term project in my opinion, even if we can still use it right now. How to use that is another set of research projects. The fact that we have this tool, how you use it, it's another set of research projects. As it's highly complicated, as it changes the way we're organizing things, having middle steps is, in my opinion, very, very useful. Something as well, and it's my final slide, something as well is the fact that you've got mathematical tools, very exciting mathematical tools, doesn't mean that the implementation is not a research project on its own. And there are really two parts in this research project, which is, okay, how can I use it? How can I redefine the tools that I'm giving to users? And as well, how can I actually implement it in a system that works? Okay? And it's an important point as well from an European community point of view, is the fact that some low-level research is fancy. It doesn't mean that the risk with this is it can be replicated quite easily. Okay? If you find a solution with 3 equations, the 3 equations can be reused by Google in a day. Software that works is actually quite complicated to get, and is not that replicable by anyone. Okay? So it means that we should not underestimate the value that it has to have something that works. And something that works, what it is, it's something that can be tested by users. Okay, can you deliver something where, okay, maybe it's not the big stuff, it's smaller, but someone can actually use it, so we can validate that it makes sense. And instead of looking at a 10 years time frame, where just wait 10 years we will have a perfect world, we can look at smaller things, saying, okay, this one, is it solved? Or even if it's just partially solved, is it something actually useful that can be used? And that's it. Any question?
So I do have a question, maybe to start. I'll be shy at the beginning. So you were mentioning that when we are looking at the issues and the different changes, we should not see them as independent variables, and they could be solved by using different layers of technology. Do you have an example of implementation where different layers are being used successfully, or aren't we there yet, where we can use zero-knowledge proofs plus state channels plus other stuff like that?
Yeah, so yeah, so it's a good point. There's always the risk if you stack 2 things that it's become too complicated. So that's the example that I was giving on state channels. And there are 2 ways of looking at this. There's not in opposition, you can have 2 of them. But maybe you can have a single solution for the 2 problem it fixes. So an example that I will be giving on how one solution can solve 2 issues is the zero knowledge, but can be used to solve both performances and privacy. We've got a single tool, a complicated one, but a single tool. And this tool can be used to solve the scalability because we're just sending proof to the blockchain. But by doing this, we solve as well the privacy because we can hide the data that we use to generate the proof. On the blockchain, you just have a proof, so by definition, you're private. Table tuition is a little bit visual. It's a little bit more complicated in real life, but that's how it is. So, with the best solutions that we have today, it's actually the same solution for privacy and scalability. So maybe it won't last, maybe we will find a better solution in 6 months that will split, but today, our best solution solves both scalability and privacy. So that's the example where we should not try to look at things in competition. And it means as well that it's important to look at, that's what the message was, okay, if we're too generic, it's very simple because we stream lemma and try to find a place on the surface. It's funny and so on, but the details are more important and can be game changers. And we're still at this point in things where we can change the game by with a better solution.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Jorge Gasus from the European Commission in the Next Generation Internet Unit. You have put a lot of emphasis on the fact of testing things, of the user experience, and not just doing theoretical research. Now, if we look at it from the perspective of the running the program, the research program, what that implies in terms that is the research group normally able to do this kind of testing by themselves, or is necessary to set up some kind of testing facility where people who are developing, who are doing the research, could test in a real user environment the things that they are being developed? How do you think that this could be approached correctly from the program perspective?
Okay, so I can't really answer from a program perspective because I don't know it. I can answer from how we do that at Consensus. Basically, the team, the global research team is 25 people, and you have, I would say, mathematicians only in this team to 90% developers with a mathematician background, but they do mostly developing. And it takes a lot of work. So first, you need to have people with different profiles, and you need them to split the work organization in software deliverable. So the deliverable is not, the final deliverable is not a paper. There are some papers still. But the final deliverable is, okay, do we have something that works from a software point of view? And including, is it something that would make sense from a user point of view? And we may be right, we may be wrong, but that's what we try to do. So when we say, okay, for the roll-up, we look at scalability, we think that it makes sense to have scalability to them. And it will add some complexity with this mathematical tools, maybe some lack of flexibility. We're going to see the reality. On top of this, we can build privacy, and then we can generalize. But the short answer is we split the work in software deliverables.
But then just as a clarification, this is an exercise that you do within your laboratory and then it remains there, or do you go, I mean, you make an implementation in a real, with real users, and then you test all the applications, or this is more a kind of laboratory analysis in terms of?
It's a hard question actually, because it's in between. It's a very good one. As much as we can, we go to a final product, and sometimes it fails. I can't do it, basically because doing a real product requires specific profiles that I don't have. So we have a kind of, we try to, and sometimes it works with the team, and sometimes what we have is more proof of concept, and then it goes to a product. So it's actually more a team-specific issue, which is, do we have the right resources at this time to do it? The final target is as product as we can, and sometimes we go there in a single step, and sometimes we go there in 2 steps. It depends as well on some parts where we feel that the risk of failure is high, because sometimes we try things and we know, okay, well, if it works, it's great, but actually there's 50% chance that it's going to fail. And in this case, it's useless to try to put too much of a user emphasis if anyone else. The conclusion will be it doesn't work. And you don't, it's Richard, so sometimes you don't know yet what you're going to get.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Emmanuel Salio, I'm working for the EU Counterterrorism Coordinator. So I have a question regarding compliance to regulations. Where do you see the impact on regulation in your research area, especially where, for instance, there is a tension between privacy and traceability, and for instance, I think to the AML CFT standards through FATF that have a strong impact on technology and the way you can solve your different dilemmas.
Yeah, so it's a key point. Today, we more or less escape a lot of it because we don't have very good privacy solutions. So nobody is really looking at us and saying, okay, we will have an issue. At a point, it will become important. So I guess, as usual, there will be a kind of discussion between what can be regulated, what makes sense, and what is technically possible. So, as an example, it's from a technical point of view, easy to do. I can have privacy up to these amounts. So we accept transactions to be private if it's less than 50 euros, 1,000 euros, your choice. And if your account has less than 5,000 euros, 10,000 euros, your choice again. Okay? So it's possible. It's not at all implemented, not designed, but it's possible. So I expect that at a point we'll have more requirements like this one. And this one is a little bit easy to plug after a while, so that's fine. I think we can do it easily. Some others are more complicated, like if you want to trace a note, a financial note that was exchanged, if you want to trace it to see where it goes and so on, which can be a valid requirement for some notes of them. And this kind of requirements are much more impactful. So at a point we're still in something, let's build the big toys and let's see how people are reacting from a regulation perspective, because they don't work well enough to be a big issue today. But like in 2 years, there will be a big issue actually. So that is the plan to have them work well in 2 years. Which means it will be, when I was thinking about delivery, if I tell you in 5 years I will have a perfect solution, you won't believe me. Why? If I say, okay, here's something in 1 year, which doesn't really cover the regulation requirements, but then there will be much more feedback about, okay, you need to have this, which is going to trigger the next generation of systems. So that's why, again, I think delivery, when you deliver sooner, it becomes concrete for everybody, and what you can do becomes concrete for everybody. And then you can have useful discussions.
Maybe another question, and we'll see if we have last questions. So, you made the case during the presentation about zero-knowledge proofs, making it very clear that this is one of the most promising technology for blockchain because it can solve multiple issues. If you had to invest time and resources on other aspects, on other technologies, what would be those? What would be another example, and what would you take as a criteria in order to select this other technology?
Okay, so this part is kind of easy. We don't have 25 people only on these topics. We've got some side topics. So one of the side topics is actually pure computer science, how to manage distributed systems where everybody is well distributed. Okay. So it's something that most of the systems that we're using today, they're inside the data center with professionals managing the system. It's very unlikely that it will fail. Okay, it fails sometimes, but it's unlikely. And for example, if you use Amazon, they manage systems in a way that there's always something somewhere that will work. Probability to have a big failure is nearly impossible. And they offer you layers on top of this that will manage this complexity for you, and the layer will know that if this component fails, I can go there, and if the two fails, I can do something. So it's totally hidden. And it's not decentralized at all. It's Amazon technology, Amazon data centers. I mean, it's fully centralized. It's work well, incredibly well, but it's fully centralized. So a lot of time spent is, okay, but how can we have something decentralized, which is basically anyone, which is basically myself in my flat, can check the blockchain, can contribute a little bit to the blockchain. And this part is quite important for mainnet if you want to say that it's decentralized and not 10 experts somewhere. And there's a lot of painful computer science issues to solve to get there, linked or not to cryptography, but which is how to make sure that the system works, even if very likely around all the people who are participating, some of them they moved to another flat, they forgot to manage the fact that they declared that the node, but the node is dead, and some nodes are under attacks and so on. So how do you do this? So this is a very complicated part, but is both important and long-term, because at the beginning it's always easy to fall back to centralization, but then you're failing. So it's a long-term investment to put some stuff on this to ensure that everybody can participate. So we do spend a lot of time on this. And some stuff that are more specialized, for example, state channel, side chains, it's specialized, so it's less fancy, but let's learn about everything. But actually, for some specific problems, it's very useful. So you have to be pragmatic and say, okay, it's not the perfect solution, but state channel, for example, works quite well for some. So we do spend some time on this as well.
Regarding vulnerabilities, do you see some areas for research on specific vulnerabilities, and even under zero knowledge proof, do you identify some specific vulnerabilities, some attacks, possible attacks?
Yes, so zero knowledge proof is basically cryptography, and yes, it's cryptography plus it's a concept with, if I say 50 different implementations, mathematical implementation of this concept, I think I'm forgetting quite a lot of them. Some of them, so when you speak about cryptography, first you're always speaking about with assumptions, which will say that we can't, mathematical assumptions with some problems are not possible to solve in a reasonable amount of time, like factorization, discrete algebra, some stuff. So cryptography is always within a very defined scope. And you always need to pay attention to the fact that your assumptions can be broken. So that's, for example, when you say that, basically you're saying, oh yeah, there's quantum computing, which is there, that can break a lot of things. So it's another topic which I don't think is that important short term, that's why I did not mention it, but that's basically the easiest answer I can do is, oh yeah, quantum computing can write all my cryptography correctly. The second thing, so that's the big stuff. The small thing that is quite important as well is schemes are produced every day, and some of them can be broken. And to do that, you need to do a cryptanalysis. So a part of our research, which is not the fancy one, is, okay, there's the guy who is finding the scheme, and there's another one who is trying to find holes in the scheme. And it's a part of our research, and it is important as well. And we are actually some people working on this, and it's not the most rewarding, especially for schemes that are not really used, because like working something that everybody uses is, okay, you're going to be famous, but something that nobody really uses, that has not been implemented and it's still paper. It's less fun. But it's actually important to have a discussion. So there's some work there. Another topic, which was your first question on vulnerabilities, is software, and vulnerabilities are quite important. So there's a whole world on formal methods that has been existing for a while, and that is actually quite important. The idea is, first, for a smart contract that you're writing, can you make sure that it does what you want? So there's a big set of features there. And for the software that you're basically saying, oh, anyone can run this software and you will be participating in the blockchain, is it broken or not? And it's software, so the answer is it's very likely to be totally broken, actually. And how do you do that? So there's a lot of tools around this, and there are two kinds of research to do. One is, what is the impact if it's broken? For example, if you hear about proof of stake, stake means as a participant, you will have something at stake. And if you behave incorrectly, you will lose your stake. So it can be very fun to go into your system and do something that will make you lose your stake. And what's the impact and so on. So there's a lot of things. What can exactly happen, what's the impact, there's a lot of things to price on this. So that's one way. And the second way is, how can you reduce the probability to get hacked? And it's another set, both research and both products. And for example, giving the example of proof of stake, it's possible to write specific hardware that will do a very small bug, very specialized, so easier to validate, easier to protect, that will include other protection against attack that will try to make you lose your stake. And there's likely a lot of low-level things to do there. Basically, having hardware provider that can give you this small box. And there's likely some money to make if you can do a good box, which can be interesting.
Just one last question.
Wallace Bhutto. For the part of user experience, you mentioned the loss of private keys, and how cryptography could help for this part.
I'm not aware actually for private keys of any cryptographic solutions, but there are some solutions that do exist today, which, for example, if the private key is not used for a while, everything is transferred to another account. So this kind of mechanism exists already. So maybe there's research to do. I don't feel that from a pure cryptographic point of view you can solve this, but you can add protocols to solve this. Okay, this one is quite easy. I mean, you know, of course, you're supposed to have your account is supposed to be linked to your private key. And if you lose your private key, you can't use your account anymore. So maybe you have, there's 1 million euros on your account, and if you don't have a private key, it's totally lost. That's basically Satoshi's. So the protocols that you can add is specific accounts, where if this account is not used for a while, after a year, then everything is transferred to another account. With this idea that you have two keys, one in the bank that you never use, and the one that you use, and if you lose the one that you're using, hopefully it will be transferred to another account and you will be able to use this kind of secret. So this one is, there's a lot of things around this area, which is a lot of low-level things, which are important in products and to validate that it actually works and makes sense from the user experience point of view. I will say that cryptography can make it a way that it won't work. Can you still do that with fancy roll-ups zero knowledge what I was point, maybe not. And that's typically something that if you have to deliver to a customer, things that you have forgotten need to be put back in the system.
All right, thank you so much for your questions, and thank you very much, Nicolas, for this presentation. Please, round of applause. All right, so next up we are going to have a panel discussion, but right before this panel discussion, I would like to welcome Giacomo on stage for a quick summary of the activities that are undergoing at Polytechnique de Milan. Please join us. Giacomo will be also presenting, will be also participating in the panel discussion, but has some elements to share prior to that.
Hi everybody, I'm Giacomo Bella. I work at a research center in Polytechnique Milano, focused on the blockchain research. We are focused on business research, so we are not as technical as the previous speech. But and we want to present our work just to give some points also for the panel discussion that will follow. And this is just some number from our research. So we are focused on research, of course, on use cases, interviews with companies. But I think that on the left there is something that is interesting also for what we are talking today. That is the collaboration with companies and the private sector. So we collaborate a lot with the private sector. We have workshops, we have working groups with companies, because we think that with collaboration with the private sector we understand what are the needs of the market, and we can foster the evolution of the market, because we see that there is still a lack of applications of blockchain, of business application. Some key results of our research in 2019. We saw that the number of business application is growing, but there is still a lack of concrete projects, because a lot of the projects that we see are still just like announcements and something that is not really concrete. So it's still we see an early phase of development of the market. We saw that the market is still more focused on platforms, so there is still work, there's a lot of work on creating new platforms. Every business project, every application, not every, because we see the 65% of projects, but the majority, when they do a new project, they create also a new platform. So with all the risk that could be involved in this kind of trend. Also because there is a great risk of not having interoperability in the future, because we have a lot of different platforms that they need to communicate with each other. We don't see a lot of international projects. The majority of projects is located only in one country. And so this is also a problem for the so-called Internet of Value, maybe in the future. And we see that the EBSI could be of great help, because it could be a place where a lot of projects also between European countries could happen. And so this is really a good signal. We are focused on Italy because we collaborate with companies that are in Italy, and we can say how big is the market in Italy, and it's not so big, but it's growing. We don't see an exponential growth. We have a steady growth, and maybe we still have to see a lot of more of investments, because 30 million is a very small number. And Also, collaborating with companies, they always ask us for students and talents that they can hire for the blockchain projects, and there is a strong lack of competencies. What we see, we talk about collaboration between universities, but maybe it's not only between universities. We see the blockchain ecosystem. These are the main actors that should collaborate with each other, because here is the value of sharing the knowledge and also sharing the needs of this market. And what we need, we try to summarize some also for the panel that follow. Best practice. We think that academia should provide companies with the best practice that they can use for understanding better blockchain technology and understanding how they can use it in a real project. Because they always ask us, okay, I understood maybe the protocol, I understood how it works blockchain, but I don't know how to make business with this technology. And we think that there are a few projects that are interesting, and they have to be explained to companies, and maybe this could help. Collaboration, of course. First of all, we think that should be a collaboration between academia and regulators, because a lot of times regulators are not very into the topic, and they, of course, have a great difficulty in maybe going in deep in the topic. And so academia as a super partes actor could provide some hints to the regulator and collaborate with them. Then university. We think that university with tech skills, of course, should begin to participate in projects, in real projects, because they could provide and they could learn a lot. Then academia, of course, should collaborate with each other, because we, from our experience, we have a great view of what happens in Italy, but we don't know what happens in other countries, and maybe with collaboration with different universities that have the same skills that we have in other countries, we can create a broader view of European of Europe. And at last, of course, education. University should provide more courses on blockchain, not only to students but also for professionals, because of course there is need also of this kind of courses. And these are the companies with which we collaborate, just to review the variety.
Thank you. Excellent. So what I would like to propose is that if there are questions, that we keep them for after the panel, as Giacomo will be part of the panel. And so directly let's jump into the panel so we can continue the discussion. Thank you very much, Giacomo, for giving us this introduction about the ecosystem. Please take a seat, and I would like to invite the other panelists to join us here. All right, excellent. So let's jump directly into the topic. So first of all, thank you very much to our panelists for being here today. As I was saying before in the introduction, really the objective of this discussion is to make an assessment of what is the current situation within the EU, and that's why it was very useful to have this presentation first by Giacomo in order to give us some numbers about what is currently happening in the field and what are the priorities that should be set. But also have a discussion on the topic that is directly related to research, which is the one of education, because of course it is important to have people working on the core technologies that will be later used in projects, but it is also very important that we train enough developers, enough engineers in order to be able to deploy those into real-world projects. And so we have the opportunity also to cover that topic. So first, I would like to take the opportunity for each of you to introduce yourself. Say a bit about what you are doing and what is your main focus and domain of expertise at the moment. You please start.
Sure, I can start. Yeah, I'm
Just need to, yeah.
I'm Roman. I'm coming from the IT University in Copenhagen. We are doing research on blockchain since 5 years now. We did the first summer school on blockchain in 2015, if I remember correctly, together with companies and governments. Mask, Nordea, the Ministry of Finance, and at that time the companies as well as the public sector said it would be great to have this on an ongoing base. You know, otherwise it's a one-time thingy doing a hackathon and workshops. So that was the beginning of the European Blockchain Center, which is what I'm heading, a collaboration between several universities to bundle competencies. As we already heard, blockchain is not just a computer science topic, it's economics, it's law, it's org science, it's ethics. There are ethical consequences of autonomous systems we are facing as society. So that is what we are kind of combining at the European Blockchain Center. As this is an introduction, I will keep it short. I'm also representing Denmark in the technical working group here at EPSI, so I see some familiar faces from last week's meeting. I'm also representing Denmark at ISO TC 307 as the national head of delegation. And at ISO, I have the honor to convene there's a working group on blockchain governance, and I see Ed and Alain and other people in this working group working heavily on standardization. And I'm also representing Denmark in the OECD policy working group. So if you're in Paris next week, I guess some of the people in the room are also part of that one. So as you can see, what we are trying to do is educate, doing research, disseminate, standardize, regulate, doing workshops for governments, central banks, and so on. But I guess there will be time to talk about that. Thank you.
I guess people know you now. Astrid, please.
Good morning, my name is Astrid Strooband. I work at HOWEST, a University of Applied Sciences. HOWEST is one of the smallest knowledge institutions in Flanders, Belgium. And we have 8,000 students and 2 campuses, one in Bruges and one in Kortrijk, and 23 bachelor degrees, and one of them is Applied Computer Sciences, and I work at the research group as a project manager.
My name is Wallace Bhutto, and I'm a social scientist economist working at the University of Amsterdam Institute for Information Law, where 2 years ago we funded with an ERC starting grant the Blockchain and Society Policy Research Lab, where we are trying to work with social scientists and legal scholars about policy issues that technology development generate. And I'm a little bit different. I have a little bit of a different approach than what I've seen so far here. But our major concern here is that not everything that is possible technically may be a good idea society-wise, and we need to grow policy discourse, legal discourse, societal understanding of technology impact together with the technology development, so we stay on top of that. And one of our major concerns is this often uncritical enthusiasm around technology, and I identify myself as a scientist, and science is organized skepticism. This is the approach that I would like to bring to the table. It's like, how can we be skeptical about both the technology and its societal impact in order to exploit its benefits to the max. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much for this introduction. So I would like to start off the discussion drawing on what has been discussed before. So the first presentation was more related on technical topics. And so, Roman, I would like to ask you the question, as you are
drawing from this standardization ecosystem and also involved at the European level. What is the current state of play regarding the maturity of the technology? And for some of the often cited challenges, such as scalability, interoperability, and those aspects, how far are we actually from solving these issues?
Wow. Well, how mature the technology is, this is a big question. Kind of, if you look at the applications you're trying to tackle, the task and question, then obviously, kind of, if I'm going to buy a cup of water, a cup of coffee here, we can easily do this on a blockchain already today. It's not really kind of risky. There's not a lot of kind of money involved, value involved. So I would be willing to experiment, kind of buying a ticket here for the Brussels Metro and so on and so forth. But obviously what we are aiming for and what EPSI is aiming for is something like the infrastructure for Europe. Kind of going, doing business abroad, studying abroad, moving abroad, with all kind of the credentials and all the, so everything that is kind of related to that. Kind of moving all my titles, my belongings, my property. And then it becomes to a point where I say, well, the solutions are not ready yet. We discussed this somehow at EPSI, and we have use cases where we are looking into this. If you look internationally into the developments, we do also have an office in Shanghai. I'm not traveling to Shanghai right now, and I haven't been in Shanghai since October, so you can lean back and enjoy. The activities over there and also the degree of maturity and of course the radicality of implementing stuff is quite amazing / shocking. So you see already a lot of systems in production, right? And that is something when we also heard this from the gentleman kind of in his presentation before. We are still hearing a lot of announcements, but we don't see a lot of applications in the real open outside. Yes and no. And we see applications out there. You see a lot of applications in Asia. How beneficial they are, kind of if they will survive, if they are sustainable, and if that is your question about maturity, well, then it's too early to answer that question. But clearly we see viable solutions that are already out there today. We've been involved in the first prototype together with Mask on what is now the cooperation with IBM TradeLens. You could say this is something that is out in the wild. It is an international solution. It is used. If it's ready for prime time, if it's going to stay, that is a question you can ask me in 5 years or so. But I think most people here in the room would say that is a technology that is going to stay. We have people from Next Generation Internet sitting here. Many of us would believe this will be part of the future protocol of the internet. So it's definitely worthwhile looking into this. So it's, the concept is mature, the applications and platforms, not all of them are mature yet.
All right, thanks a lot. Giacomo, I would like to draw on what you were presenting before. So you have a clear view of what is happening in the research ecosystem and what papers are currently being published. Could you please tell us a bit more about what are the current trends within Europe? So what are the countries that are the most active from what you know? And I know that Italy is your focus, but still I'm sure that you have an understanding of what is happening within Europe. And also what differences there might be between the different countries within the EU, with some countries might be more focused on technical aspects, some other may be focused on other aspects. And second, in the second part, if you could give us a view on how does the activity, the research activities on blockchain in Europe compare to other regions of the world.
Okay, another difficult question, but try to. For sure, what we saw is that different countries have different approaches on the technology. On a business side, we saw that different countries approaches blockchain with their strength in business. Let's say, to explain, in Italy, we are focused on agri-food and food tracking. And just because the Italian food and made in Italy is a brand and is something that is very valuable in Italy. And so when we see blockchain, we see a lot of projects that are focused on this field, because it's a need that have to be satisfied. And for other countries, we saw that maybe, I don't know, okay, Switzerland, a lot of financial projects, a lot of projects in finance, also in Germany, but we saw that every country is approaching the technology, applying it on what they already know. And I think that I don't know, because maybe there are countries also in the US maybe that are focused, of course, just to from a general point of view, they are every country is focused on the finance. We saw that the 60% of the projects are on the financial markets. So this is something that every country has in common. But then there are different approaches. But there is still, I think there are still few projects. So if an example, there is the big project of Maersk and with TradeLens, then one country is focused on the logistics and the shipping industry. So it's still early maybe to understand if some countries are more focused on something, but I think that everyone is building on use cases that are already the strength of the country. On the research part, I have to admit that I don't have the view of the differences between the research that we have in Europe confronted with other countries. But what I saw on academic paper outside produced by academia is that there is a lot of focus on research on technical aspects of blockchain. So like in Bitcoin, there is a lot of research, a lot of academic papers, but there is still a few research on business application. And if you want to understand, analyze how business could use blockchain, there is still a lack of research. There are a lot of maybe literature review that understand, okay, everything is written about blockchain and supply chain, but then if I want to read a paper that explains me why blockchain is useful applied to supply chain, okay, now I have some difficulty to find some paper. And I think that this is related also to a technology that is not still not mature. So also who try to analyze projects have to analyze them. Cannot have a broad view of different projects. They cannot analyze the entire market and how can business exploit blockchain, but is an analysis that is driven by every use case taken one by itself. So it's not easy to have a general framework of understanding.
And so on that particular part, so with the Observatory and Forum, we are doing an effort in order to map the different initiatives, so including research activities. You with the Observatory Politecnico di Milano are doing the same. Still, I think that even with our activities and your activities, we still struggle in order to have a comprehensive view of what is happening even in Europe and what is happening across the globe. So if you had the recommendation to make in terms of what needs to be looked into specifically, maybe by the continuation of the observatory or by other actors that are currently looking at working in that field, what would that be and how should they focus on that?
You saw our research about
all the business application in the world. Then the only way to do this now is to read every news on blockchain and analyze every project. And it's a huge work, and it's not very, sometimes what you read in newspaper is not very, not precise, or something that is missing. So what I think, and what I was saying also before, it is that universities or other public body, or also private sector, that has a view on what is happening in every country or in a particular sector, should collaborate, giving a view of what they see, so that we can have this analysis that is more complete than what we have now. And also for what regard best practices, is something that if we cannot have a view of everything that is deployed right now on blockchain, maybe we can have a view in deep on some project that we believe that are successful. I don't know if you collaborate with Maersk for the trade trains project. This could be something that also in Italy companies come to us and say, okay, do you have something more about this project, because I'm interested. I work, I don't know, I have contact with MSC that is part of this project, but maybe want to understand more before to invest in this technology. And so having someone that already implemented something could be very useful. And so this is also it is only happen with the collaboration, because just one university or just you, I don't know, as a European Blockchain Observatory cannot have this view on everything that is happening. So it's
yeah, the efforts in order to achieve that goal of mapping everything and having a clear and updated view on the ecosystem is quite a huge task, but I agree with you that collaboration is probably the key to it. Balazs, you said something very interesting I found in your introduction. You were saying that we talked a lot about what we can do in terms of technology, but not a lot about what we should do. What are the risks that you are seeing there? When you are saying things like that, are you maybe referring to things that are more related to ethics? And so, what are the topics that are not related to IT at the moment that we should look into and that should be a priority in the EU?
Yeah, almost 10 years ago there was a conference in Torino about the university and cyberspace, and there was a keynote there. I'm blanking now on the name. A science fiction writer was standing in front of the crowd, and everyone was super excited about how we can turn the university into this cyber virtual classroom and all that, and was saying, guys, these technologies that you are dealing with have an actual have a shorter lifespan than a hamster. And I thought you academics have a job to network the dead with the unborn. Your responsibility is to do an transgenerational knowledge transfer rather than service or cater to technologies which have really short lifespan. So for me, the really interesting question when I saw your presentation is that all these corporate sponsors that you proudly listed on your table, is like how they compromise or bias the research agenda, the questions that you ask, your priorities as an academic. And this is also super relevant for us as legal researchers, because many of the questions that we are asked is like, is this particular technology design GDPR compliant, are very short-term questions which can be answered by law firms or by people who actually interface with clients and have to or are paid to give legal advice. For us, the really interesting legal questions are much more long-term ones rather than these very short-term business applications. And I think we should be better aware of what are the daily questions to ask and what are the long-term societal challenges that we need to think about. And I have a number of questions around the societal challenges. So for me, one of the major headaches as a researcher is, okay, we are talking about the control technology. This is a technology of controlling human behavior through hard rules and crypto-economic incentives, through very strict codes. We are coding rules into technical systems, right? And I see three scenarios in front of us at the moment. One is the blockchain, or sorry, the BitTorrent peer-to-peer anarchy, the crypto-anarchist vision that the original Bitcoin developers thought of. It's like how we can actually develop a system which avoids all kinds of state or centralized control. This is a very dystopian vision from a European social democratic point of view, right? You don't want to live in the Wild West. This is not the European approach, right? On the other end of this control technology applications, we see China's social credit system and the state, together with corporations, just gang up and use the technology to lock down a society. This is also not what we want to have, right? And then the third alternative is what we see with Libra, is that big corporations deploy or try to deploy this technology and build their own private jurisdiction. This is the Libra issue, and when I see supply chain management solutions being implemented left and right, what I see is that all these big companies are super happy that finally they have a technology where they can extend jurisdiction over law enforcement countries. This is pure neo-colonialist project. So the question is like, is there a fourth alternative within the European political space, if you like, which does not want to use the technology or can prevent the development of the technology into any of these dystopian scenarios, where technology has democratic oversight, where there is a certain degree of cooperation and not antagonism between technological and legal modes of regulation, but it's not taken over completely by private corporations or authoritarian political agendas. And I think this is the long-term research question. Whether a particular application is AML compliant or GDPR compliant are interesting questions, but they can be answered in the short term by market players. This is not necessarily the question of economics.
Okay, and so what insights can we get from other technologies? Because those questions have been asked, for example, for artificial intelligence and of course many other technologies. So what are the practices that have been set up on other technologies in order to make sure that the development of the technology goes into a direction that is respectful to democratic rights, for example? And can we take some inspiration from those other technologies and apply that to blockchain?
Yeah, so we established this lab at the UFA because the institute where I'm working at has a really long history with copyright legislation, copyright infringement, peer-to-peer file sharing. And there we have already been through this cycle of development where ever stringent attempts to control technology produced ever more invasive technological design, where we ended up with a super strong copyright regime and a very lively piracy underground, right? And the two coexist. And from a societal point of view, this is not necessarily the ideal solution. So what we are trying to do is work with policymakers. It's like how to not fall into that trap, how to push technology to evasion. But then the question is, like, what are the policy priorities and what is the language of policy priorities? And when I see a lot of the, for example, the academic research funding, that's like, we have to remain competitive with China and the US. We have to be friendly to business interests. We have to be responsive. Then we are again implementing policies which not necessarily serve public interest, which not necessarily serve democratic control, which do not necessarily serve long-term societal interests. So what I'm trying to do is to identify what are those long-term societal interests which need to be inserted into this techno-optimist agenda or particular political discourses which push research agendas, push funding into certain directions.
All right, thank you very much. So Astrid, you are really bringing a different point of view into that discussion, as you are more also with Roman presenting aspects related to education. And so I would like to ask you two questions related to this. The first one is, what motivated actually OWEST in order to create programs that are related to blockchain technology? And the second question is more related to when we look at those programs, what should be the priorities? Should that be increasing the overall amount of programs in the EU to train more people? Should that be making sure that the people who are trained have a multidisciplinary approach in order to answer the needs of blockchain technology? Or should that be other means that could be helping us in that goal of having more people that are skilled and that are able to take on the projects in Europe?
Well, since 2017, we have our major IT and blockchain consultant. So, well, our slogan is anticipating the future, and that's typical for HOWEST, together with digital art and entertainment, where it's a game education program and industrial product design. We want to deliver the profiles of tomorrow. So that was the strategic decision to have a training on blockchain in our program. They have blockchain, but it's a part of a bigger training program next to the other business applications like ERP, CRM, cloud, so that they have a broad overview as a consultant when they get to work. Now it's very much an IT training, but they also have classes in project management and do some teamwork, and it's very practice-based, and also in assignment of business they do some projects. But I think the added value should be as well that there is like an IT training, or also an overview of technologies or digital transformation and IT in a broad sense in other fields like in social sciences, political sciences, economics and law, so that it's not only strict, so that is more like that's the intertwining of skills, not only in one training program, but because from our experience, our IT students are a bit reluctant when it comes to doing workshops and make business flows visual together with the end user and with the client. So they're typical, or maybe that's more like in, well, nerd, I would say, but they're a bit reluctant so I think that added value is in the intertwining of skills and other training programs as well, and not only training blockchain and architecture and development.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, the focus is really on multidisciplinary profiles, making sure that they have the right IT skills, but also making sure that they have the soft skills and project management skills that will be needed for later on. As a follow-up, so you probably have a very good view of what is happening in terms of education programs for blockchain. Do you see a lot of collaboration between the different universities on that specific field? Do you see, for example, do you collaborate with other institutions in order to provide with other types of trainings, and do you see that happening in the ecosystem? And do you think that would be something useful, or actually things are working well with different institutions providing each their different courses?
Well, it's with the help of the European Union that I met a professor in Malaga during Convergence, and he started a network of the academic institutions that were present there. So this sort of international academic collaboration, but within Flanders, Belgium, not yet. So it's a bit typical that at the European level we find each other through projects like Interreg project Blockchain and Government. We now have a good connection with 4 other universities, but within Flanders and within Belgium, the collaboration on this topic is well, rather small, but yeah. It should improve in the future, of course. We want to collaborate.
All right, thanks a lot. So, Roman, obviously, as one of the pioneers with the European Collection Center, so what is your view on education at the moment? Do you think that we are currently answering the needs of the market when it comes to providing those engineers to the projects that are needing them today?
If we are providing enough blockchain engineers or blockchain philosophers or everything in between is a good question. I was just wondering about the question regarding the collaboration within the European Union and universities. We, for example, do a PhD seminar this year in Germany together with the University of Nicosia, one of the front runners in kind of Bitcoin research and having a master in Bitcoin, and now they moved on in a more generic field. What we are doing for many years is education on a PhD level, where I mentioned the Blockchain Summer School, which takes place this year again, blockchainschool.eu, where we divided it into 2 tracks. So use case tracks, that is where we started, and I mentioned already Mask and others, but also a protocol track, where we do kind of applying blockchain and kind of training those who are more on the applied side, as well as developing DLT systems of the future. And what kind of code related, and how do you implement accountability? You know, how do you create a system that has a certain amount of flexibility on chain to adjust to changes to make a system resilient? How do you transfer tokens from one DLT system to another through token wormholes and all kinds of fancy concepts? So what we are doing here on the PhD level, and last year we had 103 participants from Tokyo to Mexico City and everything in between. So I would say there is a fair amount of international collaboration, and not just from China, but yes, there is a huge interest from China. We had I think, 8 professors from China last year as a delegation. But there is a university collaboration ongoing, and that is Bloxburg, Blockchain for Science, which has been founded. I'm a founding member of that one, together with the Max Planck Gesellschaft in Germany, who is kind of a bit like Edo Room, we all enjoy when we are hoovering around from university to university. Surprisingly, most often it works in the universities around the world. You have something like a blockchain platform for collaborating, sharing knowledge, writing papers together, sharing expensive data, and you want to know who's for your eyes only, all these things. So there is a collaboration. I can only invite everyone who is looking for international collaboration among universities. The next meeting takes place in 3 weeks in Berlin, and we monthly proof of authority, monthly vote for new members. This is also a question of scalability. At some point, we are I think last time we voted on 20 universities onboarding them. So there is collaboration. There's a growing field of collaboration, but yes, it could also be better. So education-wise, to answer your question quickly, we do have a specialization on blockchain economics for students. Mainly, you would say, are special in information systems, which is a combination of business administration and computer science education. We do have PhD programs, courses such as the summer school, and also we do in our blockchain academy weekend courses for C-level managers and for decision makers in governments, which is mainly focused on nudging, mechanism design, behavioral economics, where you trying to changing and re-incentivizing systems so that you can change taxation and so on, behavior. So that is what we are doing, where we're trying to translate our research insights also into education output and this kind of stuff.
When we take a step back, so obviously there is lots of activities, but when we take a step back, do you think that is enough in terms of the full ecosystem?
Never ask if it is enough, right? So of course not. I was actually 3 years ago standing over there just behind this thingy and was advocating with EU slides, actually together with Benoit Abelos, on we need a euro chain and we need a crypto euro. Right? And back then kind of people were kind of, it was more packed than today. Where kind of I made it out, kind of I survived getting out of the room, but just barely. And then, so kind of 3 years later, we discussed that stuff. And that was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, not something like kind of reading the crystal ball or just kind of poking in the fog. It was clear that this is coming, and we could have had more emphasis on education, on also in a critical discourse, because that is what is lacking. You know, a societal discourse, what the system potentially can deliver and fix. Because we are sort of overwhelmed by some sort of technology, typically that is creating a hype. Then people are disappointed when they realize, damn, it's not that cool than I thought in the first place. And then we go back on track with some sort of applications on the long tail end of this. And what is missing is a societal debate, which is kind of, if you will, flanked by discussions and by academic insights. Evidence-based decision-making. It's one of the reasons why we wrote this report last year for Denmark, where the Danish Statistical Office actually contacted 3,000 companies, 3,030 in 6 sectors. 20% of all companies in Denmark in that 6 sectors answered. And now we can say, this is what your peer group is doing, what are you doing? Now, when I'm saying blockchain is great, people say, of course you say that because you come from the European Blockchain Center. You know, what else would you say? So what we need is a discourse, we need a discussion on a national level, on industry level. And what we have is, unfortunately, a media that is talking about Bitcoin is for criminals, it's burning so much energy. We did a project last year for the EU Commission Joint Research Center on if it is possible and if there are DLT systems already out there who are able to meter CO2 emissions of all the 300 million vehicles on European roads. You know, if you wanted to meter the CO2 in the exhaust and you want to give kind of freedom and control back to the member states over that system, while at the same time, in order to kind of meet the Paris Agreement, you want to have an enforcement mechanism that works throughout Europe, is a DLT system actually capable of handling that? So we have to develop a benchmark test to compare DLT systems first. But whenever I'm talking about that, people say, this is a shitty idea. You know, you're fighting CO2 emissions with something that is consuming so much energy. We have to get over that point. We have to educate society. We have to get to a point where we can actually discuss the topics which are more relevant. And we are lagging behind in the societal debate. When you open a newspaper, it says about it's energy intense, it's for criminals, it doesn't work, it's taking away your privacy. All this is of course true, but it's hiding the fact that there is a lot of kind of benefits that are potentially out there. And in a critical discourse, we have to come up with we have to develop a societal consensus. What do we want? We haven't mentioned wallets yet. So we talked about EPSI kind of wallets, giving control back over your digital traces to citizens. It's possible. Do we want that? Do politicians want that? Do member states want that? In Denmark, we are highly digitized. We are very transparent. You know, I can at any point in time I can see how much tax I'm owing to the Danish government because everything is online. You can know how much I'm earning and so, you know. But maybe if we push forward, is more digitization always better digitization, or is there an optimal degree of digitization, giving control back over your digital traces to the citizens? But when I'm discussing this in Denmark, people say, wait a minute, oh, we need the data. And I said, yes, you need the data, you're sitting on the data, but maybe in the future you have to kindly ask the citizens to give the data to you. And of course, administration doesn't like to hear that, right? So when we talk about that, we also have to go into the more uncomfortable areas. If we are serious about giving control back to citizens, that debate is important. And I'm stopping here.
Thank you so much. Giacomo,
I think that this question is particularly interesting from your point of view because of the ties that Politecnico di Milano has with the national corporations in Italy. And when we look at research efforts, actually a lot of efforts are being done by private actors in addition to what is being done by the academics. And so, in your opinion, do you think that collaboration between those private actors and the academics is working well currently? And do you think that there might be some elements that the EU could do in order to foster a better collaboration on that aspect?
First of all, I think that collaboration with, I agree with this view that the private sector is working maybe more on the research than the university or public sector. And I think that from our perspective, at least when we 4 years ago we started to do research about blockchain, there were companies that didn't know anything about the blockchain, but other companies, a lot of consultancy companies, were the only one that understood the technology very well. And for other companies, also big companies, the blockchain has always had this blurred view of we don't know exactly what it is, how to use it, and so it's difficult to propose it. And what we see is that not only is useful the collaboration between universities and private sector, but university could be a place where companies from the private sector could collaborate with each other. Our research center works, we kind of provide this place where that is pre-competitive, and so companies that came to our workshops are not competing with each other, are not showing how they are better or they are trying to sell their solution, but they are working together to understand if and how blockchain could be useful. And so we did a lot of working groups between companies of the same sector. For example, in the energy sector in Italy, we tried to get together with companies in the energy sector, also with consultancy companies, but to understand if blockchain could be useful and what would be the benefits, also economic benefits, because we are talking with companies, but if blockchain could be useful. And this is very hard to understand it without talking to companies, because otherwise you are making assumption, but you are not really talking with someone who has the need to implement this technology. So there is, and I think that what Roman was saying is very interesting, because the education part is very important, not just for students, but for institutions, for the public. And when you say we have to talk about social impact of this technology, I think that from at least in Italy or from what we see, we are still behind the possibility of talking about the social impacts for two reasons. One, there is a lack of education, because it's true that the people, it's maybe in the energy sector also, okay, we are doing something with energy, but there is a lot of cost of energy, and you say, okay, it's not every blockchain that works in the same way, so you have to try to educate. And also on the newspaper, when there is someone that is talking about cryptocurrency, there is always someone that is okay, you cannot talk about cryptocurrency because it's called the black market or so on. So it's we are still behind this talk. And then there are some projects, there are some early implementation of blockchain, but we don't see something that can provide this material for a discussion on the social impact, because right now we can just think about the future. How can people, like an example, could manage their identities? There is something that is going on also with ESM at EPSI, but we are still trying to find what are the applications. So it's relevant, but it's very difficult to understand social impacts without real projects or without something to analyze.
Thank you. So we'd like to ask one last question to actually all of our panelists today. So as you may know, and as Peter is presented at the beginning of the day actually, there is under the ABSI a major research initiative that is currently in preparation. And so if you had to give one advice or to highlight one specific point that should be a point of attention for this research effort to yield its maximum benefits, what would that be? Maybe starting with Wallace, if you want to answer that question.
I would like to answer this question with another anecdote. In 1943, Enrico Fermi, the Italian physicist, and a bunch of others built the first nuclear chain reaction. It was called the Chicago pile. And if you Google the image, you will see that it was built. It was like 450 metric tons of graphite and 50 metric tons of pure uranium. And they just stacked it on top of each other, these slabs of uranium and graphite, in the middle of Chicago under a sports field viewing stand. So it was like what could possibly go wrong, build a chain reaction in the middle of a city. And I often have this impression that history repeats itself. Well-intentioned scientists and engineers are building highly risky technologies in the middle of society, right? Without actually being able to really control it or being fully aware of all the things that can go wrong. Fermi and his friends didn't blow up Chicago because they knew the physical laws that govern nuclear reaction. They had good instruments, and also they had a guy with a bucket and a guy with an axe who were standing on this nuclear pile, and they were supposed to dump some material on the chain reaction to stop it. But what my problem is, and this is the challenge for us scientists, like, do we know the rules that govern how technology interacts with society? No, we do not, because this is not physics, this is economics, this is social sciences, this is ethics, this is so many other things which have much more obscure rules than physics alone. Do we have the instruments to actually trace how technology works, what happens within the technology or within society? And we don't, because these technologies, whether these are AI black boxes or whether these are social media personalized screens, are very inscrutable for external control. And ultimately, we do not have anyone with the bucket and the axe, so we don't have a safeguard. When something goes really wrong, we can actually stop things. So my biggest challenge is like, if we try to build highly risky technologies which can actually go really wrong, how do we build the instrumentation with which we can actually predict the development of a process, with which can monitor the development of the process, and then with which we can actually stop undesirable outcomes. And that is as important, and the engineers and the computer scientists probably will argue, then the development, it is as important as the development of the primary system in itself. If we are unable to wrap them into logics, understandings, knowledge, and technologies of control, the primary technology that we are developing, then like, Fermi didn't blow up Chicago, but then we had Fukushima, we had Hiroshima, we had Chernobyl, we had so many bad outcome with the technology, we should be very aware that this can happen even if it's digital. It can happen even more because it's digital, because it's planetary scale, it affects billions of people at a time, it's automated, and it's decentralized to a certain point where it becomes very difficult to actually have a big red button that is stopped if something goes wrong, and the DAO hack perfectly showing that.
Thank you. I never considered before that we had in our hands atomic bombs when we were talking about blockchain laws, but the point about ethics and where technology should go is actually a very good one, so thank you very much. Astrid?
Sorry, I just want, no, ethics is not a good approach because you cannot enforce ethics. You can have ethicists who can tell to computer scientists, this is how it should be done. But this is like, you need control, not ethics, which is a framework which is very hard to enforce. The question is what you can enforce in terms of control over technology development. Sorry.
Thank you. Astrid, any recommendations that you would like to give out, maybe also thinking about the bridge between research and education and how can we facilitate that flow?
Well, I was more thinking that FC should grasp this opportunity to set up a broad communication initiative to inform the public about blockchain and the advantages that self-sovereign identity has in it, and at the same time ask the opinion of the civil society. What do they think of it? Are they able to manage their own identity, and do they want that? Yeah. And raising awareness on digital transformation, I think that's an opportunity for FC to not only look at the infrastructure, but at the moment also to get the broader public involved.
Thank you. Giacomo, Roman, maybe a few last words before we go on with the questions of the public.
Maybe some field of research that is related to EPSI could be the interoperability, because from what we see, we don't think that in the following year EPSI could be the only platform that exists, and everything that is blockchain projects will run on EPSI or is built on EPSI. So the question is how also projects that are already live and already working could interact with EPSI, and if this is a problem or maybe there is a solution, maybe this could be an interesting field of research also for the development of new use cases on EPSI.
I will keep it short because I'm wearing several hats, and I'm, as I mentioned, also sitting in EPSI representing the Kingdom of Denmark and in the technical committee. And I made my point clear last week. I'm not sure if that was falling on fruitful grounds. There will be some countries which we may have something more to say about what needs to be done. And I will keep it here also for the interest of time.
All right, thank you very much to all of you. Let's open up for questions from the audience. Please, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Martijn Bolt. I am from the Netherlands. I work on blockchain implementation in practice, and I work on education. I work with the Hague University of Applied Science, and we have an elaborate educational program there focusing on blockchain and implementation in regards to legal, computer science, and business administration. So we focus on the broad spectrum of application of blockchain. The idea of having this European blockchain services infrastructure is very appealing. We run nodes within our university as well. We don't run this node at this moment, so it was suggested in the presentation of Mr. Vella, very nice. The challenge there, I think, is we don't have unlimited resources, and adding another technology to our stack, well, requires a lot of resources and also inclusion in the educational documentation, for example. But the biggest challenge is, I think, the students themselves. They are very interested in this international global technology, for example, the permissionless blockchains like Ethereum, Bitcoin, and the likes. Convincing them that stepping away from this global approach and into this regional approach with the European blockchain infrastructure is going to be challenging and is going to require extra resources. And the main reason we have these technologies running in our universities now is because the students are very focused on this global holistic view. And I think that is very hard to bring together in some way. I'm not sure how I'm going to convince the students into doing this without any coercion whatsoever. So I'm interested in how the views of implementation of this are at your table.
So before, Pierre, you want to make a point related to this question?
Yes, thanks. So Pierre Marot, I'm part of the blockchain team working with Teris in charge of this partner. So I think at this stage we should maybe re-clarify or refocus a little bit the debate. Because we are very glad about the attention that we draw with this EBSI initiative. But today the workshop is not focused explicitly on this EBSI stuff. It's more about research, a kind of research and maybe education also agenda for blockchain in general. So for your last point, we are not preventing you to do everything you consider to be worthy for the global picture of the permissionless, the permissionless blockchain like the one you made reference. Then of course we are very interested by also to know exactly what should be done on short term for the improvement of the EBSI, but it's only one part of the challenge that we want to address today. And then to come back to your point about the nuclear weapon that we could have in our hand, it's because we want to be prudent that EBSI for the time being is considered to be a permission blockchain with a governance structure. And we start to think about the use of EBSI for something which is very specific. We are not yet saying that EBSI will support a crypto euro or something like that, even if we have some reflection at EU level about, in the wake of the Libra announcement about what should be done. But we are not yet at the stage to say EBSI will support the crypto euro and next year it will be what will be offered to the citizens. So we are rather prudent in our approach for EBSI, but what we want to do is what was praised at the beginning of the discussion or in the previous presentation, that in order to start to have this reflection, we need to have something concrete around which we can put people on the table, where we could have legal assessment which are made, impact on social issues. But this is what we also aim to do with infrastructure. With the EBSI, it's not only to provide services based on infrastructure, it's also to use this infrastructure to advance on those type of legal and social assessment. So just to clarify that for today we are not talking about only EBSI, but about a broader research agenda that could indeed include technological aspect, interoperability aspect. I think it's a very important point that maybe could be debate during the rest of the day. And legal and social aspect are also part of it.
Any comments from the panelists on the previous questions, or maybe we move on to the others?
Just supplementing that a little bit further, I mean, it's clear that the European Blockchain Services infrastructure will offer European public blockchain services. So the European Court of Auditors will publish its official publications from the European Court of Auditors in Luxembourg. This will not happen in the United States or Japan. And things like regulatory reporting of value-added tax by the member states to the other member states, again, will not happen in other jurisdictions. So it is in, I think, no conflict with doing things globally and utilizing e-commerce or collaborating with people in the US, Japan, China, and so on. But there are certain things that come from the governments or come from universities physically in Europe that the EBSI can help with. And it's good to be ambitious, but we're not overly ambitious to to take over the world or take over all of e-commerce or anything of that sort.
Thank you very much, Peter. Any questions from the audience related to the topic? Yes, please.
Well, sorry, it's not related to this point particularly. I actually wanted to follow up on Jacobo's point or observation that basically there isn't much collaboration at the application level. And I think this is a challenge, and I'll share with you. So by the way, I'm Arnaud Laurence from IBM. I'm involved in Hyperledger, and I can share with you that in Hyperledger, when we started over 4 years ago now, we had a working group that started talking about use cases. And a lot of people showed up, but nobody wanted to share because they wanted to hear what everybody else had to say, but nobody wanted to share anything because, unfortunately, I mean, this is the way it is. They are competing at that level. And so it naturally limits collaboration. So we see a lot of collaboration at the lower level, at the blockchain framework level, the technology, because this is not typically where people are going to compete that much. I mean, there are some platforms that compete with one another, but overall, the crux of the competition happens at the application level. And, you know, for better and for worse. I mean, some I think probably will be proven wrong. They think they have the application that's going to be the killer app for blockchain, and they have, for them it's a very big secret. They don't want to share because they think they're developing this application and they'll take over the world with it and make a fortune. And so, we actually stopped this effort within Hyperledger when we realized people were not willing to share their information. And I think this is a problem you're going to face, at least for a while.
Follow-up question. Arnold, could it be that it was too early? That by now many use cases there have been developed solutions with pilots and early stage companies that are willing to show what they're doing?
I mean, in a way, yes, but in reality, I mean, you don't know a lot of the details of the applications that are being developed, right? If you look at the framework level, there's lots of public information. You know how the systems are architectured and how they function, their pros and cons and stuff. At the application level, it's a lot more mysterious. There's a lot of proprietary code, and not a lot of them are open source, and you just don't know how they function. You have features, and talk about tradelets. IBM is involved in it, so I can, a lot of people criticize the fact that it seems to be a very closed system, right? Often you don't know who even, we talked about decentralization earlier, and it's like you don't even know who the nodes are, and so I think there's a lot of lack of, collaboration at that level because of that competition, and until things settle down, at least, I think that's the way it's going to be. You know the use cases at the high level, but you don't know any of the details. Anyway, that's my view.
I would like to use this opportunity to actually ask a question to the audience. Because what I hear now is maybe it's also for the legal policy discourse is a question of accountability. Like the lack of information or the lack of willingness to share is the lack of accountability on behalf of a development, which we still, this is my impression, still like to talk about as if it was a technology. And what I've learned looking at the last 2 years, and the Netherlands and the Dutch Blockchain Coalition's efforts were super instructive in that, is that there is a point in almost all of the projects where they realize that this is the question, the challenge that they face in terms of application is not a technological challenge, it's an institution building challenge. It's like, how do we build another institution around another technology? And that's not a technological question. And actually, engineers start to ask, okay, I can include any rules into the system, but what those rules should be, then is there someone who can answer this question? And this is not a technological question, this is a business development question, or an institutional sociology question, or a political science question, everything but a computer science question. So for me, the biggest challenge also for education, but also for a wider societal development question is like, to what extent we need to actually build a fundamentally interdisciplinary knowledge. When I listened to your presentation and you said you have 28 mathematicians, computer scientists doing research, I hope that you do quantum secure cryptography, but not anything beyond that level, because I truly believe, and I hope you will forgive me saying that, that having such a monodisciplinary research is actually, like, I don't even know how that can be done. Like, and I see that in every other discipline. It's like, it's impossible to do legal research without actual thorough understanding of the technology. It's impossible to do economic research without a thorough understanding of the regulatory environment. And we are entering into this domain where we have to be bilingual or trilingual or polyglots in having experienced more than one discipline to actually be able to recognize the challenges. And much of the hurdles that many projects do not pass is this institutional change, this shift of mind. It's like, okay, it's not a technology, we have to think in terms of building an institution, but we have no idea that was the task and how to do that.
Any last point before the break? Any answer to the point?
Can do a comment which matches what you're saying. What I saw in the past in the different industry, I mean, financial banking industry, was a clear framework from the US. It was basically absolutely official. But the target, what we are saying was, we're going to construct a well-designed regulatory framework that all the banks in the US will follow. And we think that in the Europe, they won't be able to do that because too many countries and so on, so we will have something very bad. So what we will do in the US, when we will have it, we will push it to the rest of the world and we will destroy the banking industry in Europe. It was basically the official plan written in the newspaper. Then Trump arrived, so everything was broken. But the main point that they were having is a good regulatory framework is something that you can actually implement and that makes sense from a business point of view. And the need for collaboration to understand what is technically possible and what makes sense from a business point of view, which is absolutely this regulatory constraint that you're putting. So we had this history in the banking. It was really in the making. It's really thanks to Trump that it has not happened. But it's basically the global context. A good regulatory framework is a big advantage from the competitive point of view. And it requires exactly what you said, understanding what you can do from the technical.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to thank our panelists for this great session. We are going to have a break, but before, please, a round of applause for our panelists.